And we continue at 1:07 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wiggs at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, in the eyes of the state of California, the biggest goal for every workplace out there, including ours, is to be as equitable as possible. Well, luckily for them, the California Department of Public Health has a new virtual webinar on their YouTube page, the California Department of Public Health Equity Toolkit, with such incredible advice like this.
If we aren't intentionally equitable, we may be unintentionally inequitable.
You're going to have to diagram that because I am completely lost.
Me too.
If we aren't intentionally equitable, we may be unintentionally inequitable.
It's a 3-minute video, and it's nothing but that.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the outgoing CEO of the Union Rescue Mission and a strong advocate for people who are living without a home, the Reverend Andy Bales. Reverend Bales, welcome.
Thank you, John.
You know, Reverend, there is a debate challenge that took place recently between our governor here in the state of California, Gavin Newsom, and current Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and candidate for president. Newsom went on Sean Hannity's television program, issued the challenge, and recently the Florida governor accepted the challenge, and now I guess they're working out the details where the two of them are going to put their vision for how their state is run and explain why that's the right model and why the other one is doing it the wrong way. And I was thinking to myself as I was envisioning this debate, you can't talk about the state of California right now without talking about the homeless crisis. It's not something that's just impacting Skid Row as it was in the past. It's something that's impacting Skid Row and San Francisco and San Diego and the Inland Empire and all over the state of California. And it's a problem that is so much worse in California than it is in other states. And that's the case for a variety of reasons. Some we have no control over, like the weather, and some we have a whole lot of control over. And I believe one of the extreme points of failure with the state of California's battle against homelessness is the idea that going clean and sober is not attainable, so we shouldn't even bother with it. And it's a housing problem, and we just need to worry about making sure that people who are homeless have available housing. You can give them all the housing in the world. If they don't kick their addiction, if they don't get their meds for their mental illness, they're still going to have a lot of problems, and they will likely be living on the streets yet again, despite however much money you may spend. Here is Gavin Newsom explaining his philosophy about going clean and sober.
Clean and sober is one of the biggest damn mistakes this country's ever made. I know it's a hold-your-hand idealistic point of view that somehow magically, I mean, God bless some of you. If you're like me, I've been known to have a glass of wine at night watching some of the nightly news. We all need to self-medicate periodically.
Reverend, I think that this forum is a great place to challenge that argument, to challenge this point of failure that has led to so much misery and so many people living on the streets, not treating their mental illness, not taking care of their addiction problem, and take it head on and have the debate in front of the American people. Because I think if you were to tell most people that that is the official position of the governor of the state of California, they'd be taken by surprise because it's so outrageous.
It is outrageous, and we are in the condition we are in because Governor Newsom in California is the only state to double down only on the housing first, harm reduction model. And the housing first is a house for everybody, a very expensive, slow to develop housing unit for everybody. Sometimes people believing everybody needs a granite countertop kind of expensive housing. And then once that is built, which takes too long, like 4 years, meanwhile, 6 people per day in LA dying, waiting on that housing unit. Once it is built, they believe in a free flow of hard drugs and alcohol. And governor may see it as a glass of wine in order to medicate himself, but some people believe it is meth mixed with fentanyl, mixed with horse tranquilizer, and the more of it they can get, the more they like it. And the extreme radical version of the harm reduction model wants all of us to get high. They keep pushing this agenda of a revolution, everybody getting high kind of revolution. And so you have to understand all of this policy, the only people it supports are cartels and drug dealers making more money. It isn't supporting the folks trapped in their addiction on the streets. We need to turn to a recovery-focused model. We need to turn to a mental health assisting model if we're ever going to deal with homelessness. And you're right, and not only are you right, Mayor Karen Bass believes just the way you and I do, and she is fighting an uphill battle because so many people in power want to keep the status quo of California with the free flow of hard drugs and the harm reduction model, and still they stick with this failed model of housing first, waiting on very expensive, slow-to-develop housing units while thousands upon thousands languish on the streets. 50% of all street homelessness in the USA is in the state of California. 30% of all homelessness in the state of in the United States is in California. How can anyone deny that we are a total failure when it comes to dealing with homelessness in California? And it's not the weather that's bringing them. It's failed policy, failure to immediately help people off the streets and into safe shelter, failure to address addictions that are killing people every day. Over 6 people are dying per day of complications of homelessness in Los Angeles. Most are dying of overdose deaths. There's no denying the numbers.
When you speak to civic groups, when you speak to classrooms, when you speak to people outside the world of those who work with the homeless, what reaction do you get when you tell them that the governor and the state of California looks at clean and sober as something that is unattainable, so don't even bother to waste money on it? When I tell people that, particularly people outside the state, they think I'm kidding with them. They think that I'm just making that up to make him look bad because I didn't vote for him or didn't support him. And I explain to them, no, this is not from the Onion. This is what they believe. They are not focusing on getting these people to kick their addictions. They believe that's a waste of money. Do you get the same reaction I do?
Yeah, I've caught myself thinking that people are looking at me like I'm speaking from the Twilight Zone. They just can't comprehend the ridiculous philosophy of the harm reduction model. And then I had a person in Pasadena who has a model that was built, permanent supportive housing with a harm reduction model, took the money and expressed to me, well, that's not the way our building runs. It's clean and sober. And I said, well, then you aren't following the policy of which you took all the money, because if you were following the policy of the groups that you took the money from, you'd be allowing the hard drugs to freely flow. It is really incomprehensible for someone with common sense to both understand the California policy and believe it's happening. When you go around our nation, the groups aren't following this policy, and thus it's the reason they don't have half of the population of homelessness on the streets of their cities and their state. It's mind-boggling to describe what goes on in California to others. It just doesn't make sense.
We're speaking with the Reverend Andy Bales, the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. You can get them at urm.org if you choose to make a donation. Reverend, you mentioned L.A. Mayor Karen Bass and how she's one of the few politicians in the state who understands that people with addiction and mental health problems need to treat those factors before you can improve their lives and get them up and functioning again. Recently, she appeared in the west side of Los Angeles with Katie Yaroslavsky, who is the newly elected councilwoman representing that district. They were speaking with the local community about building housing for the homeless, and members of the community went ballistic at the meeting. They do not want that building to go up. The spin on the news was that they're NIMBY types and they don't want housing for the homeless going up in their neighborhoods. But that's on the surface. You scratch the surface a little bit more. The argument that they're making is essentially the argument that you and I are making. If you just give them homelessness, or just give the homeless housing, and you don't treat the underlying condition that put them on the street in the first place, you're just going to create a problem in that neighborhood because they're going to bring all of their problems with them to that housing unit. Your thoughts on that?
You are absolutely very perceptive and absolutely correct. I think Mayor Bass got caught up. Maybe doesn't yet fully understand that when she goes out with a representative fighting for housing in their neighborhood, they don't understand that they're carrying with them that housing first, harm reduction model, and the neighbors know that the free flow of drugs will happen not only in the building, but in the neighborhood around them under our current policies, under our current Measure H and Measure HH practices, that it comes with that free flow of hard drugs, that there's nothing you can do about it. It comes with very little security, very little accountability, and neighbors will welcome a well-run, fully accountable place like Hope Gardens Family Center or Angeles House in South LA. What they don't want is a free flow of hard drugs and gangs coming and going, providing the drugs and all the crime that comes with it. People high on drugs maintain that addiction by going out and robbing their neighbors, and it brings trouble to the neighborhood. That's why the neighbors booed when this housing opportunity was presented. And I believe strongly, as you do, that if you bring accountability and recovery and mental health assistance to the housing, the neighbors will absolutely welcome it. They won't be described as NIMBY. They will be YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard, but unfortunately, all the housing that we're delivering right now is under the harm reduction, better said, harm enhancement free flow of hard drugs in those buildings. And even the shelters that are funded right now with federal, state, and local funding, including Measure H and Measure HHH, require the harm reduction model. And we did that to ourselves. We self-proclaimed the harm reduction policy. We attributed it to, it wasn't LASA and wasn't HUD ordered. Everything else we get from HUD is HUD ordered harm reduction. But we raised the Measure H money. We raised the Measure HHH money. We raised the ULA money, unfortunately, and we labeled it as harm reduction. We did this to ourselves.
Why do you think there's such a big disconnect? Because the people of L.A. aren't stupid. The people of L.A. understand what you and I are talking about, and we saw it on display at this community meeting, and we see it on display all over the city whenever you put a microphone in front of someone's face. Why is it that the council doesn't get it? Why is it that the governor doesn't get it? Why is it that our public health agencies don't get it? The people get it, our electeds don't.
We have a distorted view of what compassion looks like. We have a distorted view of what freedom looks like. I don't have a freedom to live in such a way that I infringe on my neighbor's well-being. I don't have a freedom to allow my neighbors to go destroy themselves right in front of my house getting high on drugs, doing whatever they want to do, living in an RV without electric and without water, and using a waste bucket for my human waste and dumping it into the storm sewers and destroying not only the storm sewers but everything around the neighborhood and all the way to the ocean. I don't have a freedom that allows me to infringe on my neighbors. I have a freedom that allows me to be a productive member of society and add to the common good. And for some reason, Los Angeles has lost its knowledge of up and down and right and wrong. To give you an example, our county has been funding meth pipes out on the streets. We've talked about that. Now they're sending out teams with Narcan to bring people back from overdose and oxygen to help somebody's brain cells not be destroyed while they're being brought back from the overdose through Narcan, which I stated a long time ago. The more that somebody overdoses and gets brought back, the more their brain gets destroyed, a couple percent every overdose. So the county has no core, right? It has no core focus on pro-safety, pro-life. It's on every side of the issue. It's handing out the needles and handing out the meth pipes, enabling the cartels to get rich, destroying our neighbors. And then on the other end, they're bringing the neighbors back to life through Narcan and oxygen. Make up your mind which side you're going to be on, and make it be the right side, L.A. County and L.A. City, and do the right thing. I'm completely baffled by the lack of focus and core value of our city and county. It's been lost.
Reverend Andy Bales, outgoing CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. If you want to make a donation, you can do so at urm.org. You do great work. Thank you for your tireless advocacy. The city needs your voice, and the city needs your voice to be louder and louder and louder. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, sir.
If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And with the facts about why California's homelessness epidemic continues to explode, you can share the podcast of the interview that we just did with the Reverend Andy Bales with your out-of-state friends and family so they understand what we're dealing with. And, Randy, that's not hard to do.
No, go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe, search for The John Phillips Show on YouTube. You can get a playlist on there of every single episode. And then when I upload this interview at about 2:01, 2:02, maybe 2:03, if I'm feeling lazy, you can listen to this show, share it with your friends, and get more people to listen to us, and then we all are successful.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Well, let's do that right now. 790 KABC welcomes Dionne Warwick to the Libby Bowl in Ojai on September 1st. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com. But right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by The Canyon, where music meets the soul. Good luck dialing.
We know that the middle class has stopped riding the MTA buses and trains because the criminals and the drug addicts have taken over and people are dropping dead right and left. Apparently, the same thing is happening on the BART trains up in the Bay Area. Well, we all know that the MTA is a complete basket case because the homeless and the criminals have completely taken over and our dearly elected leaders have allowed it to happen.
This is the sound of a guy who got stabbed with a machete outside a metro station.
You may want to consider not using the metro.
Well, apparently we're not the only ones in the state of California living in an insane asylum. It's happening in the Bay Area, too.
That's right. Bay Area Rapid Transit has reported more overdose deaths on their system at this point in time than all of last year. Sound familiar?
For more on this, here's KPIX TV.
As people make their way home on BART for the Friday commute, many passengers know all too well that the opioid crisis that's plaguing Bay Area cities.
They kept that music going just a little too long. Gotta trail it off.
plaguing Bay Area cities has also become a battle for the transit system. In fact, just yesterday at the North Berkeley station, transit ambassadors...
Every time I hear it, I can't help but laugh.
Can you even say that with a straight face?
I don't know how these reporters who do this are pros. There is no way I could, with a straight face, report on transit ambassadors without bursting out laughing.
In fact, just yesterday at the North Berkeley station, transit ambassadors used 3 doses of Narcan to revive an unresponsive man who fell on the floor of a train.
How big of an OD do you have to have that you have to use 3 cans of Narcan before you wake back up?
That's a lot of drugs.
You know, this is something that happens...
I'm going to guess that person's a lost cause.
You know, this is something that happens almost daily somewhere across the BART system. And our Wilson Walker has learned the number of overdose deaths on BART just this year has already climbed past last year's total.
Hey, we're better than San Francisco at something. We beat that number in February.
Where I grew up at in Arizona, there was nothing to do but drugs, you know?
Oh, good. We're talking to the meth heads on the bus. I guess it's Golden Mike's time.
I don't know if I'd want that job as a beat reporter.
Where I grew up at.
You know who's great at it, by the way? You know who will go to the homeless encampment and shove the microphone in their face? Phil Schumann at Fox 11. That man is brave.
Phil is fearless.
Where I grew up at in Arizona, there was nothing to do but...
You know, I know it's radio, but I bet everybody listening can picture the amount of teeth this guy has.
Okay, I've been to Arizona many times. There are plenty of things to do in Arizona that don't involve meth.
You're saying that you've never, while in Arizona, thought to smoke a little crystal?
No, I go for spring training. I play a little golf. I enjoy some of their wonderful restaurants. Go for a hike or two. Not once have I ever dabbled in meth.
Where I grew up at in Arizona, there was nothing to do but drugs, you know?
Sitting at the very end of the Civic Center platform, just as BART is about to shut down for the night, one rider about to make their way back to the East Bay.
I currently am homeless, and I have a motorhome. My motorhome is parked in Castro Valley. I just came over here to score, you know, but it's cheaper over here to get it, you know?
So his commute is that he's taking the BART to go buy his drugs in Oakland or San Francisco, and then he commutes back to his RV in a remote location.
This is quite the spin on the man in the gray flannel suit.
I currently am homeless, and I have a motorhome. My motorhome is parked in Castro Valley. I just came over here to score, you know, but it's cheaper over here to get it, you know?
The meth is a lot more expensive if you're in a remote area. There's a lot of supply in downtown San Francisco in the Tenderloin. There's not as much supply in Castro Valley.
He's giving a verbal Yelp review for drug dealers in San Francisco. You can't beat the prices.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there are Yelp reviews for drug dealers at this point.
Incredibly cheap.
John is among those who come to San Francisco for the city's buyer-friendly drug market, and anyone who's ridden BART knows the drug crisis is coursing through the transit system. So far this year, 20 people have died on trains, in stations, or somewhere else on BART property.
Oh, John, we're twice as good as San Francisco.
Well, San Francisco's not that big, so 20 is quite a number.
These presumed overdoses are referred to as unattended deaths, a number that has now surpassed last year's total.
I mean, there's so much of it that I don't think they can do anything about it. You know?
Is this guy having an OD while he's talking?
It sounds like he's in the process of dying.
I mean, there's so much of it that I don't think they can do anything about it, you know?
Hello? Hello?
This is one way BART is responding. 19 crisis intervention specialists.
Oh, boy.
So this is a take on ambassadors?
Are part of an effort to deploy as many different uniformed bodies as possible, both to respond to people in trouble and as a deterrent to keep the drugs out.
How's that working out?
They're dying right and left. It's not working at all.
Police officers are crisis intervention specialists, are transit ambassadors.
How do you think the cops feel when they're constantly lumped together with the ambassadors when people talk about public safety?
You know, one of the things I like to do when I am at a Starbucks or a diner or someplace like that, and you have a table full of cops just sitting there having a cup of joe behind you, shooting the breeze. I like to eavesdrop in because you quickly find out what's going on in that particular neighborhood, on that particular beat. I would love to eavesdrop in on the cops on the beat that involves the BART stations with all the ambassadors to hear what they think about the job the ambassadors are doing.
Police officers, our crisis intervention specialists, our transit ambassadors, fare inspectors, our community service officers. We committed more of our uniformed personnel to our trains and our stations.
Not only are they trying to get more people in more places, BART leadership is hoping some of this can be mitigated with new fare gates, but managing this drug challenge is becoming something of an old problem.
And one morning, I got to pull out the camera. I got to show my friends this. They're not going to believe it.
Many of you will remember 2018 when this cell phone video of Civic Center Station made national headlines and prompted emergency discussions between mayors, police agencies, and BART leaders. Well, something that jumps out of that video, just about everyone in that hallway was using a needle. Finding a bit of tinfoil on the ground back then was something of an exception. So the problem hasn't gone away, it has changed. A more prevalent, more lethal drug. If you're watching BART try to respond to all of this, what you're seeing is the evolution of the larger opioid crisis.
That's right. They're not just doing meth, they're all doing fentanyl.
And here's the problem. If you live in a suburb that has sane policies, but you have a station that the train goes to, whichever city around you, whichever big city doesn't function on any possible level, their problems come to your city and you can't do much about it. It's why when the city of LA doesn't function, that's a problem for Whittier. That's a problem for Glendora. That's a problem for Claremont. That's a problem for all of these other cities. Because of the trains and the buses and the subways, it's very easy for all the problems that LA creates to get on the bus and go someplace else. And you say to yourself, well, in Glendora we're sane. Why is it that people are showing up? Well, in Los Angeles, that city doesn't function on any level. And their problem becomes your problem. And you see that happening in the Bay Area too. Oakland and San Francisco are bonkers right now. And because they're bonkers and the trains pick people up in San Francisco or people take the trains to San Francisco to buy the drugs, there's nothing the suburbs can do to make sure their citizens are safe because San Francisco and Oakland don't function and they make the problem worse and they export their problem to everyone else. But right now we're going through all the chaos on the trains and buses in the Bay Area.
Let's go back to the interview with the meth head who takes the train to get the drugs to bring them back to his RV.
I went from smoking heroin to shooting up heroin, and then this stuff came around and fentanyl epidemic hit and made everything 100 times worse.
And instead of getting that guy help and treatment, we probably handed him free needles.
Right. And if you were to talk to any elected official in that area, they would say that this man's problem is the cost of housing.
Just as fentanyl has driven up overdose numbers in cities where BART passes through, it has done the same within the system. But the deaths are only part of the story. Every BART staff member you see while traveling is now equipped with Narcan, and they are using it every few days, sometimes several times in a single day.
Yikes.
That's a lot.
That's not a success story. By the way, this is why the state of California is now manufacturing their own Narcan, because it's in that much of a demand, because we don't want to get people off the drugs.
I'm surprised they're not buying it from a lab in Wuhan.
To revive passengers who might otherwise be the next fatality. And again, it's happening everywhere. BART says its average response time to a reported overdose is about 4 minutes. However,
we can't be everywhere all the time, so we definitely depend on our riders to help us identify some of these issues.
I think he OD'd.
Okay, I don't know if you've ever ridden the BART before, but when you go from West Oakland to the first stop in San Francisco, which I believe is the Embarcadero, you're actually under the bay. That takes a while to go from Oakland to San Francisco. It's not like it's 30 seconds and one stop. If someone were to OD on the train when you're under the bay, it's going to be a while before they're there.
Me, myself, I've resuscitated people that I don't even know, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm not going to let somebody just die, you know.
This heroin addict's a hero.
He's a first responder of sorts.
Some people...
They know how to use Narcan. They are trained. You need to find that vein, they're expert at it. Honestly, I'm surprised how many heroin addicts don't realize that they have a promising career in phlebotomy.
My guess is this guy doesn't even have to read the package.
For his part, John says he's hoping to find a treatment option, reconnect with his family, and break the cycle.
Like, I have kids and stuff, and I can't see them because this, you know?
A cycle that has landed him and so many others in a similar situation, battling addiction in the most public of places, no matter where it takes them.
You know, unless we had a zero tolerance policy for that, and the first time we saw him shooting up heroin on the train, we put him into treatment, then maybe that guy could see his freaking kids.
Again, I know I'm repetitious on this. Our politicians are literally looking us in the eye and saying, this man's problem is the cost of housing.
I guess we're all just regular people, and we all have somebody that loves us somewhere, no matter if it's here or anybody else. And I think everybody deep down wants help, and nobody wants this for themselves. You know what I mean?
Then why are we enabling it?
Because that is the policy of the state of California.
That's powerful. It's sad, it's powerful, and just in your reporting over the years, it's escalated.
Yeah.
So what is BART supposed to do? What are we supposed to do?
That's a good question. You know, you're the assistant chief there saying that they need help. You know, they can't be everywhere.
Right.
You know, there's a...
Everyone get your own Narcan.
Everyone seems to get it, but the people in power.
An app where you can let people know if there's something going on the train. But, you know, you look at BART struggling with this. Think about all the businesses in San Francisco who have the same problems. You know, who arguably have greater control over who they can refuse service to. And they have people walking in and dying in restrooms. How could you fortify BART in such a way that you keep this crisis out? I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, how did you...
I mean, you know, if you've got somebody who has the power to arrest, maybe, I don't know, a police officer, sees anybody visibly on drugs, and you take that person away, then they wouldn't OD on the trains.
Isn't this the whole point of care court? You arrest them, you send them to care court, and then they send them to rehab, either rehab or jail.
Yeah, hopefully when that starts, we'll see something. But right now, this is insane.
Different part of the state, same story.